In this video, we will dive into the movie Snow White and the Huntsman. We will discuss the movie story, summarize the plot, and explore the cast and characters. Additionally, we'll cover the movie's production details and box office performance. Finally, we'll provide a review and share some personal reactions. Let's begin with the movie story. The film opens with the Huntsman, played by Chris Hemsworth, as storyteller, sharing Snow White's story as how her kingdom fell under the power of a charismatic evil queen. The opening scene promises a tale surprisingly in step with the story's Brothers Grimm roots. A beautiful queen, longing for a child, comes upon a brilliant red rose belonging in defiance of winter's cold. Pricking her finger on a thorn, 3 drops of blood fall to the snow. A stark visual contrast that prompts her to wish for a child with skin as white as snow, lips red as blood, and hair as black as a raven's wing. And this is the key, a spirit akin to the rose defiance and strength in belonging in the dead of winter. In time, a daughter is born to the queen and her husband King Magnus, the old Peter in Lion King, the Witch and the Wardrobe, and Kristen Snow White, as physically she embodies the beauty her mother wished for prior to her birth. But more than outward beauty, Snow's mother never fails to remind her daughter that true beauty comes from within, and that is her greatest strength. But Snow's happy childhood is doomed to fail. No more prolonged weird games with William, her best friend and son of Duke Hammond, her father's closest advisor. Snow's mother dies and her father goes completely off the rails. Conventionally, the king's resultant death wish coincides with an invasion of dark knights who happen to be made of glass. And let me tell you, watching them shatter is absolutely mesmerizing. Following this discernment easy victory, Magnus comes upon a prison wagon holding a beautiful woman named Ravenna, played by Charlize Theron, and is instantly summoned. Her golden hair and clothes are the complete opposite of the Dark Knight. And of course, she's a victim, right? Let's not think about why she would be the only human in a sea of glass warriors, whatever. Magnus carries her off to the castle and makes plan to marry her the next day. Because why? Wait, that would make sense. Silly man. The wedding night does not go well for Magnus, as to be expected. Ravenna is no victim. She is the sources who use the Dark Knights to gain entry to the castle. And does she ever have issue with men and power? The dichotomy between Snow and Ravenna is one of the film's most interesting points. Snow rises with the understanding that true beauty and strength comes from purity of heart, while Ravenna, as it is revealed later in flashback, bears the mark of her mother's conviction that beauty is her only power, a weapon to be used to avenge her mother's death and to crush her enemies. But such a course is not without a falsehood. By Ravenna's fairest blood the spell was cast, but by fairest blood it can be undone. On that fateful wedding night, Ravenna seizes control of the kingdom and imprisons Snow, the guard's only allies, William and his father, barely escaping with their lives. Now I am not entirely sure how much time is supposed to have passed. If it's mentioned in the film, I can't recall. In the novelization, it's 10 years, but on the film's Wikipedia page, it's 15. But either way, Snow is now of age and is played by Kristen Stewart, who is wisely given very little dialogue, and there's where things start to get interesting. Charlize Theron as Ravenna owns this film. Her evil queen is by far the scariest, most intense, memorizing incursion of the legendary villain to ever grace the screen, or my imagination for that matter. Her icy blonde beauty is the perfect foil for Snow's darker looks, and the intensity she brings to bear on this role is just incredible. Screaming, bodily thrashing around, she throws herself to this role heart and soul. That said, I wish, oh how I wish, the film gave Ravenna's character more context. It isn't revealed until over halfway through the picture the source of Ravenna's power, and that is only is a hazy flashback sequence. I wanted to see what brought Ravenna to Snow's kingdom, what set her on of course to become a power-hungry queen, and perhaps most of all, who was responsible for the attack on her family that led to her mother's gift of the spell that would ultimately become her daughter's destruction. The idea, the setup of physical beauty as a weapon versus beauty and strength of spirit is nicely muted out throughout the film. But I was left wanting. There's a lot of promise in the twist, the incarnation of the familiar story begin to life, but all too often the development of potential fascinating plot points are left underdeveloped. So Ravenna's power is winning because Snow was finally come of age, no longer content with consuming the youth of captured young women. I thought that was just a brilliant twist on the queen's desire to remain the fairest one of all her mirror, played by Christopher Abbey. Seriously, the Milton Miller, amazing. Advise her to consume the heart of Snow, her primary rival, and it is gangster promises her immortality. Ravenna sends her brother Finn, played by Seamus Sporrell, a completely disgusting creep, to bring Snow heart to her. Was it just me, or did Ravenna and Finn's relationship have some disturbingly incestuous overtones? When Finn enters her cell and is completely gross, Snow sees her chance and slashes him with a nail, escaping her cell and barely escaping the castle with her life. This is where Snow kind of goes off the rail a bit. She shows little ill effect from her impressment. She has a surprising amount of stamina and apparently no negative psychological impact from being locked up by a psycho since she was a small child. Thanks to a conventional available horse, she make it to the dark forest, aka the point of no return. Now the forest is the Disney film terrified me as a child, and I loved how the filmmaker took the concept and ran with it. The mechanic tree with their cropping branches, the idea of hallucinogenic pollen increasing the terrifying vision, the concept of the forest feeding on one's fear, all of that brilliantly played out on screen. Indeed, it is a mark of one of the film's greatest assets. It was building and set design. This is a movie you can lose yourself in quite literally, and I was happy to do for 2 hours. With her prey ruse in the forest, Ravenna requires a hunter with nothing to lose and enter the huntsman. The other best part of this film when it comes to acting, I could write pages on Hemsworth's performance. It's deadly with angst, love me some angst, and self-loathing. The huntsman is a man in need of redemption, in need of a cause, and so such he was responsible for the greatest part of my emotional investment in this film. Really, this just shouldn't be the movie about Ravenna and the huntsman who needs Snow. The huntsman is all for delivering Snow to Ravenna until he meets Snow in the dark forest, and it is what? Impressed by her depression to live, unaware of the value of his charged identity, the huntsman takes Snow to a nearby village, claiming all he wants is a monetary reward. But oh, Chris, we know your type. You're not as far gone as you'd like everyone to think. Now, prior to this film release, thanks to the trailer and reading various summaries online, I fully expected a lot of screen time to be given to a teacher-student relationship between Snow and the huntsman. I was under the impression she would transform into a warrior queen under the Teleg. Well, unless I missed something, the huntsman teaches Snow defenses move, and the end of the movie she is wearing armor and leading men into the battle. The script instead spends too much time, especially when Snow meets the dwarfs, developing this rather silly idea that she is not some of healing master survivor. There is no context for this savior complex. It is just a given thanks to dwarf Mayor, played by Mob Hossins, apparent power as a seer. I am sorry, but Kristen Stewart has the charisma of a 2x2 I cannot buy her as a savior or warrior queen at all. She works very well as Snow White when she doesn't say anything, but even then that gets a bit nuts because she is a mom when by conflicts dialogue, including scene and ridiculous when she talks, really the top piece. So let's try to wrap this up. Interesting cast member. The dwarf are brought to life by a score of family's face. There's a aforementioned Hoskins joined by Ann Micon, Ray Winstone, E.D. Martian, and Toby Jones. To name a few, I confess that after a single viewing, I was left rather lukewarm by the dwarf appearance. I enjoyed seeing the familiar face, but was annoyed by their use as a vehicle for driving home the idea of Snow as survivor. I wish that, like all the characters in this film, had been a bit better realized script-wise. I was thrilled to see Rachel Sterling as Anna, one of the women Snow and the Huntsman encounter in the village. At the edge of the forest, Anna is the one who reveals Snow's true identity to the Huntsman, and she brings the tragic shot of graviates to the role. It was especially heartbreaking to listen to her explain how the women of her village voluntarily scare themselves in order to escape Ravenna's search of consumable beauty and youth. I have been impressed by Sterling's appearances in The Young Victoria, Inspector Lavish, and Miss Purper, and look forward to seeing more of her work in the future. The adult William is played by Sam Claflin of Pirates of the Caribbean on Strange Tides fame, doing a lovely Robin Hood Hagen impression with his bow and arrows. Seriously, what it is about Arch on film lately. I loved William's loyalty to Snow White, the way he goes undercover with Finn's men in order to find her, but oh, how I wish he had a more charismatic leading lady to work with. Oh well, I was fascinated by the script twist on the famous apple scene and how it involved one of the Snow's oldest friends. Seeing William after the Snow the apple, then realize Ravenna adopted this form and watching her transform. That was really well done. Also of interesting the famous kiss, and this is not William, whom we expect to woke Snow, who delivers it. It is the Huntsman kiss that wakes Snow White from the poison apple includes slumber. From taking with a few friends, I gather many viewers would prefer Snow to end up with William, but the Huntsman's kiss can take the point in another direction. Will be very interesting to see how these relationships play out in the sequel. Leaving aside the fact of the moment that I think both the Huntsman and William deserve other leading ladies. Working with what we are given, I love the idea of Snow White and the Huntsman as a twist on the traditional princess ending up with a prince fairy tale trope. Hemsworth's delivery of the Huntsman's apology for not protecting Snow in just heart-rending started in regret and what it is. In principle, if not in execution, I love the concept of Snow White making the Huntsman a better man of two individuals from such desperate background complementing each other. I want my revised and refreshed fairy tales to have twists like this, and having Hemsworth fill half of that equation. Well, that goes a long way in my book. Lest you think I didn't like this film, rest assured that I did. But there was so much unrealized potential that I could not help but overanalyze. I am actually thinking about seeing it in the theater again. I am not holding my breath, but if the planned sequel materializes with more attention to story and character development, married with this film's stunning visual and costume design. Now let's talk about the movie main cast biography. The first one is Kristen Stewart. Born April 9, 1990, Woodland Hills, Los Angeles, California, United States, is an Academy Award nominated American actress who first received widespread recognition for her role in the first 5 Twilight Saga film franchise 2008 to 2012. She later became known for her nuanced, critically lauded performances in independent films such as Cloud of Sils, Maria 2014, Spencer 2021, and Love Lies Bleeding 2014. Her background and early career. Stewart was born in the Los Angeles suburb of Woodland Hills to parents employed in this film industry. Her father, John, was a stage manager and producer, and her mother, Jules, worked as a script supervisor and filmmaker. She has an elder brother, Cameron, as well as 2 adopted brothers, Taylor and Dana. Because of her parents' work, she found herself on film sets as a child. Drawn to the bustling atmosphere of filmmaking, Stewart received her parents' permission to audition for her roles as a child. She was first cast in the feature film as the tomboy daughter of Portia Clarkson character in The Safety of Objects 2001. She played a similar role on the daughter of Jodie Foster character in David Fincher's Panic Room 2002. Her breakthrough role came at age 17 when she was cast as Bella Swan, the brooding high school student entrusted in a supernatural romance with the vampire Edward Cullen, played by Robert Pattinson in the First of Light film 2008. She continued her role in the successful film franchise over the next 4 years, briefly becoming the world's highest paid actresses at the peak of televised popularity in 2012. After starring in Snow White and The Huntsman 2012, Stewart increasing starred roles in smaller, independently podcast projects including French director Olivier Anaya's Cloud of Sils Maria 2014, for which she received the French César Award for Best Supporting Actresses, became the first American to receive the honor. Stewart also started in Assassin Parliament Thriller Personal Shopper 2016. In 2021, Stewart played Diana, Princess of Wales, in Chilean director Pablo Lawrence Spencer. The film images Diana as a relating experience during a Christmas holiday spent with the royal family in 1991 at the Queen's Sandringham Estate in Norfolk, England. Her building sense of confidence within the retrieved norms of royal life and the strain of her constant visibility in the public sphere are conveyed through Stewart's unsettled and defiant demeanor. The layered performance was recognized with an Academy Award nomination for Best Actress, represented one of the best Oscar nominations in history for an openly gay performer. Critics have noted Stewart's striking yet understand and naturalistic approach to acting. As New York Times film critic Manuel Davis wrote in 2014, Stewart is a performer who makes good movies better and dreary movies tolerable, with a restlessness that has made her one of the more interesting attractions in American films. She has a gift for making characters' inner life transparently readable, and while she can be subtle for withholding, it is her fascinating unquiet presence that draws you in and itchy intensity that can keep her and you on edge. While transitioning to independent film, Stewart also saw projects that resonated with her queer identity. The actress publicity came out as gay during her opening monologue for Saturday Night Live in 2017 and subsequently played a number of queer roles. She starred in Clea Happiest Season 2020, a holiday-themed lesbian romantic comedy, appears as a lesbian gym manager alongside a love interest played by martial artist and actress Katie O'Brien in the erotic thriller Love Lies Bleeding 2024. Directed by Rose Glass, this is slated to play Susan Sontag in Sunset, an unconventional biopic of the bisexual intellectual's life. Stewart became engaged to her fiancé, screenwriter and actress Dallin Mayer in 2021. She and Mayer co-founded the production company Nevermind Pictures and producer Maggie McLean in 2023. Stewart is working on her full-length directorial debut, an adaptation of writer Lydia Membrial, The Chronography of Water, with Imogen Post cast in the lead role. Acting. The performing art in the which movement, gesture, and interrogation are used to relate a fictional character for the stage, for motion picture, or for television. Our second main character is Charlize Theron. Born August 7, 1975, Benoni, South Africa, is a South African-born actress who was noted for her versatility and earned an Academy Award for Best Actress for her performance as a real-life serial killer in Monster 2003. Theron grew up on a farm near Benoni, South Africa at age 13. Wanted to continue her ballet studies, she began attending a boarding school that specialized in the art. During a visit home when she was 15, her mother shot and killed her father in self-defense after being attacked by him while he was drunk. At age 16, Theron moved to Milan to work as a model. 2 years later, she settled in New York City, where she continued to model and began studying at the Joffrey Ballet School. A knee injury ended her chances for a career in dance, however, and she attempted unsuccessfully to pursue acting job. Theron eventually moved to Hollywood, and while making a loud scene after a bank refused to cash a check, she was discovered by an agent. She subsequently began landing some small parts, one of which is 2 Days in the Valley 1996, gained her favorable notice and paved the way for her first lead. In The Devil's Advocate 1997, the film showcases her acting ability and versatility and led to further substantial roles, notably in Mighty Joe Young 1998, Celebrity 1998, The Cider House Rules 1999, and The Italian Job 2003. Her acting talent was further expressed in her award-winning performance as a serial killer, Alien Vernos in Monster. Theron's immersion in the role, she became almost unrecognizable thanks partly to a nearly 30 weight gain helped her become the first African to win an acting Oscar. Theron appears in two movies in 2004, The Life and Death of Piper Sealer and Head in the Clouds. Her performance as a miner battling sexual harassment in North Country 2005 earned Theron an Academy Award nomination for Best Actresses. She subsequently appears in the drama In the Valley of Elah 2007, the superhero movie Hancock 2008, The Rod 2009, an adaptation of Cormac McCrory's post-apocalyptic novel of the same name. In the drama Young Adult 2011, Theron stars as a willfully immature woman who returns to her hometown in pursuit for her high school sweetheart. She elevated the screen as the Evil Queen in the dark fairy tale adaptation Snow White and The Huntsman 2012 and its sequel The Huntsman Winter's War 2016. Her character in the sci-fi thrills Prometheus 2012, the leader of a space expedition, was similarly icy and imperious. Theron's later roles including a gunslinger who assists a shepherd played by Seth Ficklonda in The Proof of Million Ways to Die in the West 2014, Imperator Furiosa, an intermediate warrior on the mission to save a group of enslaved women in Mad Max Fury Road 2015, and Libide, a woman investigating the brutal murder for her family in The Dark Place 2015, an adaptation of the thriller novel by Gillian Flynn in the animated Kobu, the two starring 2016. Theron provided the voice for a Shirley Monkey. In 2017, she starred in the action thriller The Fate of the Furious, the 8th film in the Fast and Furious series, and Atomic Blonde, in which she played a British spy. Theron's film in 2018 include the dark comedy Grindo about a pharmaceutical company executive is kidnapped by the members of a drug cartel in Mexico, and Tully, for which she earned a Thosotic review for her unupcoming portrayal of an overwhelmed mother of three. Theron later starred in the romantic comedy Long Shot 2019, played a US Secretary of State who is planning on running for president. Her other credits from 2019 including Bombshell, a docudrama about the sexual harassment scandal that led Roger Ailes to resign as a president of the Fox News Channel. For her performance as Megyn Kelly in that film, Theron received her third Oscar nomination. She then appeared in the action movies The Old Guard 2020 about a group of immortal mercenaries, and F9 The Fast Saga 2021, an installment in the Fast and Furious series. During this time, she also voiced the matriarch Motricia in the animated comedy The Addams Family 2019 and its sequel 2021. Our third main cast is Chris Hemsworth as Huntsman. Born August 11, 1983, Melbourne, Australia, is an Australian actress who came to fame for his role as Thor in several Marvel Cinematic Universe movies. Early life and career. Hemsworth's mother was an English teacher and his father a social service counselor. His two brothers Luke Hemsworth and Liam Hemsworth also became actors. The family moved back and forth between Melbourne and the outback community of Bullman, Northern Territory, eventually settling on Phillip Island. Hemsworth's first acting job came in 2002 when he played King Arthur in 2 episodes of the fantasy television series Ganver Jones. Like many Australian actors, He cut his teeth with a role 2004 to 2007 on the soap opera Home and Away. Hemsworth then moved to the United States in hopes of transition his acting career to film. He was cast in the role of the Captain Kirk's father in J.J. Abrams' 2009 movie Star Trek, and the same year he played a messinating hitchhiker in the thriller A Perfect Getaway. He appeared in the minor action movie Cash 2010 before his first outing as the Little Norse god in Nath Bangrash's Thor 2011. The movie told the story of Thor's arrogant project of a peace and being banished to 21st century early to learn humanity. Hemsworth's light, self-mocking and human touch is his portrayal of the comic superhero made the film a hit and launched a popular franchise. He later starred in Thor The Dark World 2013, Thor Ragnarok 2017 and Thor Love and Thunder 2022. The latter two were both directed by Taika Waititi. Hemsworth also played the character in other Marvel movies including The Avengers 2013. Other roles. During this time, Hemsworth appeared in numerous other films. He had a leading role in the horror movie The Cabin in the Woods, filmed in 2009 but not released until 2011. He then portrayed the Huntsman in the Remnant's fairy tale Snow White and Huntsman 2012, a character he repeated in the less successful The Huntsman Winter's War 2016. Other notable roles include that of Formula One car driver James Hunt in the Ron Howard's critically praised Rush 2013, a computer hacker in Michael Mann's crime thrill Black Hat 2015, and a sexy receptionist in Ghostbusters Answer the Call 2016, a Gander-flipped remake of the classic 1984 comedy film. He gave a well-received performance as an underestimated Green Beret captain in the Afghanistan War story 12 Strong 2018. Hemsworth also played a secret agent handling alien affairs in the Men in Black International 2019 and a heroic mercenary in the action movie Extraction 2020. He reprised the latter role in Extraction 2 2023. Hemsworth was almost unrecognizable under a large prosthetic nose in his performance as the blow-out villain Dementis in George Miller's Furiosa, a Mad Max saga 2014. In 2022, Hemsworth started in the series Limitless, which counter on villainous and self-improvement. Throughout the series, this undertake various health-related challenges that test his limits. In 2024, the actor was chosen as a co-hire alongside Bad Bunny, Jennifer Lopez, and Zendaya for that year's Met Gala, the annual benefits of the Costume Institute at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, New York City. Hemsworth married Spanish actress Ilsa Patoki in 2010, month after meeting. They gave 3 children, daughter India born in 2012 and twin son Kristen and Sasha born in 2014. Snow White and the Huntsman renovates the legendary story in a film of astonishing beauty and imagination. It's the last thing you would expect for a picture with the title. It faltered in its storytelling because Snow White must be entirely good, the Queen must be entirely bad, and there's no room for nods. The end is therefore predetermined. Oh, what a ride! This is an older Snow White than we usually think of, played for most of the film by Kristen Stewart. Capable and plucky, she has spent long years locked in a room for her late father's castle, imprisoned by his cruel second wife, Charlize Theron. When she escapes and sets about righting wrongs, she is a mature woman of interest the 2 young men who joins her in her mission. But the movie sets up scenes of romance, and in the way I suppose that's wise. The Huntsman, played by Chris Hemsworth, is a heroic, might-guzzling hunter assigned by the Queen to track down Snow White and bring her back to the castle. After encountering her, however, he is so impressed he changed side. There is also Prince William, played by Sam Claflin, smitten since childhood, and the 2 men join in an unstated alliance. The queen lives in terror of losing the beauty of her youth and constantly tops up with the blood of virgins to restore it. She tests her success with the proverbial mirror on the wall, which melts into molten metal and assumes a spectral form not unlike death in the seventh seal. Although its metallic transformation process reminds us of the Terminator. The castle, which sits in Eric's splendor on an island giant to the mindlit only at low tide, is a gothic fantasy that reminds me of the Gottermangish series. The queen is joined there by her brother, somewhat diminished by his blonde page by haircut, who does her bidding but seems rather out to lunch. Extract appear when needed, then disappear. The queen commands extraordinary supernatural powers, including the ability to materialize countless blackbirds that can morph into fighting demons or sharp of cutting metal. All of this is rendered abruptly by the special effect, but the treasure of the film is in two of its locations: a harsh, forbidding dark forest and an extinct fairyland. Both of these realms exist near the castle, and the huntsman is enlisted in the first place because he knows the dark forest where Snow White has taken refuge. In this forbidding realm, nothing lives, and it is thick with the blackened bones of dead trees. As if a forest fire had burned only the greenery, there is no chair here, and a mysterious troll confronts Snow White in a dramatic stare down. After the huntsman frees her from the dark forest, they are delighted to find or be found by the 8 dwarf. Yes, 8. Although one doesn't survive, reducing their number to the proverbial 7. These characters look strangely familiar, and no wonder the magic of CGI has proved the faces of familiar British actors such as Ian Mashney, Bob Hoskin, Ray Winstock, Nick Frost, A.D. Marson, and Toby Jones. While the technique is effective, it nevertheless displays 8 working rom dwarfs with jobs which isn't really fair. The dwarf leads them to the favorite rom in the film, an enhancing fairyland which is a tribute of art direction and CGI. Mushrooms open their eyes and regard the visitors. Cute forest animals scamper and gambol in tribute to a fairies scene in Disney 1937 animated film. The fairies themselves are naked, pale-skinned spirits with old, wise faces. The spirit of this forest is embodied by a great white stage with expressive eyes and horns that spread in awesome complexity. This is a wonderful scene. The director, Rupert Sanders, who began in TV commercial, is clearly familiar with establishing memorable places. As for the rest, there is a sufficiency of medieval battle scene, too many of my taste, and a very exciting siege of the castle, added by the intervention of the dwarf and featuring catapults that hurl globes of burning tar, always enjoyable. There is a great film here, somewhat perhaps one that allowed greater complexity for the character. But considering that I walked in expecting no complexity at all, let alone the visual wonderments, Snow White and the Huntsman is a considerable experience. In this new version of the fairy tale, the second in just a few months, Snow White is like a cross between Aslan and Jones of Arc. It's very different from the jockiness of Julia Roberts' Mirror Mirror, but with a familiar basic problem. Kristen Stewart starred as the heroine, Charlize Theron in the sexy Evil Queen with headgear modeled on the Disney animation, and Chris Hemsworth played the Huntsman, who is now a fully blonde romantic lead, a hunky stably protector with an accent like Russell Crowe's Robin Hood from Godbean, Towson and Dublin. In the manner of Twilight and Hunger Games, the film gives Snow White an unresolved and franchise-friendly romantic choice between the Huntsman as a posh prince resonantly named William. Unlike Julia Roberts' feebly exposed version, this movie does at least tackle head-on the Queen's sexual jealousy, and Theron has an interesting steely cornice at first, but soon she is reduced to speaking like a panto villainess in that all-purpose pod-peak accent. Her stepdaughter leads a revelation against the Queen's misrule, and Snow White has the power to coerce the people's physically alignments. Like Mirror Mirror, the dwarf or badass forest being gang played by British actor but with a Narnia touch. It all become very drawn out and like Mirror Mirror tries to fix what is not broken. The pageant clarity of Snow White being portrayed by a non-mother and then having to be a quasi-mother to save little people, this is evidently far too babyish and needs to be sexed up. A rather teen abstinence of the result is tangled and overblown. The scenery is gorgeous. Charlize Theron looked great in close-up and her costumes are spectral. The special effect of turning all those British character actors into dwarf is impressive. Did I mention the scenery is gorgeous? Yeah, I think it's all have the nice thing I can think of concerning Snow White and the Huntsman. A would-be epic that is merely lifeless at best and flawed out inspired at worst. Despite all its chainmail and shivering sword, the first two-thirds in the same basic Snow White stories you already know, just a little more extreme. Only no, it is not extreme, it's a fox extreme. Dark yes, but blunt is bland and clearly born for a boardroom looking to capitalize on all that fancy crap that kids like these days. By some twist of fate, the dullest of all possible humans, Kristen Stewart has a high Q rating due to her involvement in the dreadful Twilight film. So from a strictly banking perspective, it makes perfect sense to cast her as the heroine of this tale. The trouble is that she has all the flair of dread. Clearly, she is made to represent poor life. Ion Mission actually calls her the one, with a near Navi-like connection to 10-foot tall and other critics. She is also Joan of Arc, suiting up in armor and charging on her horse, sword held high. How is that a young woman who's been kept locked in a tower since her pubescent years knows how to sword fight isn't explained? If I didn't jot this down in my notebook, I may have forgotten this little dip in logic. But not because the climax to Snow White and the Huntsman is so riveting it negates all quibble, but because there are so many dumb parts, it is possible to remember them all. Here's one worthy of the some scorn. The Queen Charlize Theron forces the Huntsman, Chris Hemsworth, to go find Snow White in the dark forest. No way he's going there, it's so dangerous. If he will not go, she will kill him, she says. Plus when he gets back, she will restore his dead wife. She's got power. Despite bitching and mourning that entering the dark forest in a death sentence, he leads the Queen's brother and others to Snow White in the amount of time it takes an editor to cut. But Snow White asks, the Queen will betray you, and the Queen's brother basically says, yeah, she's right. She cannot bring your wife back. Why the hell would he say that? He cannot just say she nuts and change the topic. They know the Huntsman is a badass, that's why they hired him. There's a plenty more, like when Snow White is desperate need of a horse for a minute, then a horse appears, but then disappear when she doesn't need it anymore, or when Thor's accent moves from English to Scottish to some sort of salvage tavern, or the sole attempt at Homer assembly poo joke, or the face morphing CGI that looks like someone left in the previous software, making it the worst best of big budget special effect since that Sync Destruction in X-Men Origin Wolverine. Basically, this is a movie designed to watch Mystery Science Theater 300 style. Lord knows we've got to say something to break the tension when Charlize Theron is riding around on the floor whimpering. Poor Charlize, she really gives it all, but she is all over the map. For a minute I thought she was getting company like Julia Roberts in the vastly superior Mirror Mirror, or super despot like Lena Hardy Caesar in Game of Thrones. I get the impression that the production may have been buttoned on the outstanding crowns she wears, but the character stone was never locked down. The blame for all this rests on the screenwriter, one of whom is the always awful John Lee Hancock, and the director newcomer Rupert Sanders. The characters are given nothing unique to say or do, and Sanders has no clue how to take lemon and make lemonade. There are two opportunities where Kristen Stewart and Thor are supposed to share a moment. I would not be surprised if the screenplay just said insert emotional connection here. Details. Sanders take his and run with it, having his leads stare at one another. That's it. That's what's supposed to set 13 years old girl's heart aflame and prove the execution that greenlit the disaster were right. Instead, it's a laugh real. Oh, and the mirror on the wall, it's more like a giant gold punch bowl. What's up with that? Snow White and the Huntsman hits theater on June 1. Jordan Hoffman was the movie editor at Hertz Digital Studio for 4 years and currently contributes to Slash Film and TV Next Movie and Star Credit. He's made two morally successful independent movies and a member of the New York Film Critics Online and was named Ultimate Film Fantastic of the movie. Snow White and the Huntsman movie review. Snow White and the Huntsman reimagined the classic Brother Grimm fairy tale as a medieval fantasy epic, which starts off on a familiar note. A notable queen sees 3 drops of blood falls on fresh snow and whispers of a daughter who is just as fair. The daughter is born, but when the mother dies, the king is in grief, takes on a new wife who proves to be his undoing. In this version, that evil queen is a man-hating Scotsman named Ravenna, played by Charlize Theron, whose dark method plunges the entire kingdom into despair and horror. Ravenna is bonded to the fate of her captive stepdaughter Snow White, Kristen Stewart, and when the vanity-feeding magic mirror informs her that Snow will either be her destruction or ticket to immortality, Ravenna opts for the consume her beating heart option. However, the 2012 Snow White is more damsel in distress and stages a Brazil jailbreak only to hop out of the frying pan and into the proverbial fire of the dark forest. Ravenna recruits the widowed drunk ward of the Huntsman, played by Chris Hemsworth, to bring Snow White back, but it is slowly becomes apparent to the broken warrior that his car is a part of a larger destiny, one she will need this and other help to fulfill. It is a tricky thing to tell such a familiar story. Remake and reboot have become dirty words these days, and there is nothing more familiar than a fairy tale that has been spun and respun countless times over the span of 2 centuries. It's also daunting when the man in the director's chair, Rupert Sanders, is taking on a wheel of the blockbuster epic as his first feature film. Against all odds, however, Sanders takes the tale of Snow White and crafts it into something visually gorgeous that is at once familiar and refreshingly imaginative. From the stunning costume of multi-Oscar winning designer Colleen Atwood to the set design and cinematography, Snow White and the Huntsman knows by its acronym of the year's nickname SWAT. It's simply an impressive piece of visual storytelling. Some of the action sequences could have been cleared and clearer, too much quick out editing. But on the whole, Sanders' scene composition and choices is photography in angling create a distinctive original style. You will know that you are watching this movie. While the visual component in excellence, the screenplay by writers Yvonne Doherty, another first-timer, Hossein Amni, Wings of the Dove Drive, and writer-director John Lee Hancock, The Blind Side the Alamo, is less impressive. On the one hand, the classic snow fairy tales is cleverly spun into a modern adventure epic with all the familiar elements: the dwarfs, the handsome prince, the evil queen, the mirror, the apple, etc., being given useful function within the narrative. On the other hand, the story is rushed. The characters are, for the most part, thin and underdeveloped, while story beats minutes to convey character personality and our development don't hit with the impact they are made to, are simply ill-conceived. A great example of these narrative misuse can be seen in the character of Ravenna, who is all screaming evil 3/4 of the time. The rule must have been held on Theron's vocal chord, but is given awkward and cumbersome harmonizing moment that never really hit the mark. They come off at random rather than insightful. It leaves Theron's performance standard in the realm of an over-the-top caricature. who seems bipolar instead of sympathetic or complex in the moments where she suddenly gets all tragic and wimpy. Hemsworth and Stewart both to fine in their leading role, but again, a lot of the moments that are made to endear us to their respective character are allure us with a will they or will not they. Romantic undercurrent simply fell flat or missed entirely. The Huntsman think Thor with a Scottish broad as a character arc that, while conveyed effectively by Hemsworth, feels muted and distant in face of the larger narrative. Snow's arc is never really clear or engaging as Stewart's is pretty much tasked with running from place to place looking wide-eyed and panic-stricken until a near third act round sees her fatted in a suit of armor running through flames having a sword, all of which she handled well enough. By the end we don't get much resolution to the main character arc and some big plot threads are left dangling in favor of an inevitable sequence. In fact, Snow White and the Huntsman pretty much feels like a first chapter rather than a complete story, which is a slightly frustrating approach to a fairy tale. The supporting characters are rendered well, especially the troupe of talented character actors who are fleshly transformed into the famous band of dwarves that aid Snow White. Here the dwarves are reimagined as the last of a once noble people, now reduced to the cross-talking, violent bandit and comedic relief. The chemistry between the dwarf ensemble, Ian McShane plays by Deadwood, Toby Jones, Captain America, Bob Hoskin, Roger Rabbit, Ray Winstone, The Departer, Nick Frost, Hot Fuzz, Johnny Harrison, Black Death, and Eddie Marsan, Sherlock Holmes is a high point of the film, and some of the best lines and scenes are wholly owned by them. Rounding out the crew are Raven's brother Finn, portrayed with creepy monique by Sam Spruell, and Williams, the young boy from Snow's past who grew into a rapid-firing warrior archer and the third-wheel sorter of Snow's hand. All of the understated romantic drama is ultimately wasted, one of those dangling threads I mentioned, and there will inevitably be some people who insist that Stewart is a failure, thanks to the cut mark fail or not of a Twilight persona. There will also be those who crack wise about how there is no question of who is fairest when comparing Stewart to Theron. For my part, I don't think Stewart's presence distracts that much from the movie. Overall, the entire cast is strong through the script they are working them often is not. In the end, Snow White and the Huntsman is an impressive debut of Sanders, another great performance from Theron, yet another breakout action role from Hemsworth. A better heroine for Stewart is to be playing and an entertaining, visually stimulating, but ultimately hollow summer movie experience. For in-depth discussion of the film, we will check next. Right from the get-go, Universal Pictures Snow White and the Huntsman had a lot going against it. First and foremost, it was coming on the heels of Mirror Mirror, another Snow White pick from relatively media. It also had to live up to what turned out to be a surprisingly well-received theatrical trailer that offered a closer look at the film's slick presentation. The project was also being helmed by a complete newcomer, Rupert Sanders, whose previous work was mainly comprised of commercial before he came on board to direct. Despite all this, Snow White actually delivers on most fronts. Broadening the scope of Disney's classic Snow White film, Scandal Redemption centers on the Evil Queen Ravenna, who has set out to conquer every kingdom on the continent. However, she soon discovered that her stepdaughter Snow White is destined to surpass her beauty and therefore challenge her claim to the throne. When Snow White managed to escape into the dark forest, Ravenna hires a gritty huntsman, Eric, played by Chris Hemsworth, to recapture the princess. As far as the story is concerned, it's a pretty straightforward affair. The film offered plenty of rousing speeches and eye-catching action sequences to hold your attention. In nothing else, it hits all of its dramatic beats and even occasionally delivers some genial impact. No doubt due In Part 2, James Newton Howard powerful original score. Having said that the film doesn't have a particularly innovative plot, the writing can feel somewhat contrived and for the most part the characters' motivational seems generally lacking. In fact, the only character with a significant ambition is the Queen. Snow White and Eric's journey is mostly one of the survival and not much else. There is a vague reference to the mystical prophecies and untapped charisma, but these ultimately amount to whimsical fluff. In the end, the only novel contribution to the mythology is Ravenna's backstory. As one might expect, Charlize Theron churned out an excellent performance as the Evil Queen, and her take on the character is deliciously wicked. It's easily one of the film's highlights. Also impressive is Kristen Stewart's portrayal as Snow White. Her presence was noticeably downplayed in most of the prompts and trailers, so I was really sure what to expect. But it's nice getting to see her perform outside of her usual wheelhouse, and it is definitely pays off. Chris Hemsworth also does a solid job as Eric, although it's a little difficult to shake the mental image of Thor, especially so soon after seeing him in The Avenger. Nevertheless, all three actors do a very good job with the material they are given. But above all else, the film is just plain pretty. The production design here is top notch, and the muted aesthetic really lends to the darker tones that being established. The environments are gorgeous, and some of them even look like they were directly lifted from their concept illustration. It apparent the Shatter that has an eye for good shot composition, and he does a great job of capitalizing on scale and the sublime. Unfortunately, some of the computer-generated elements, namely the mythical flora and fauna, don't look quite as inspiring. At times, they can even be distracting and pull you out of the story. That's not to say that there is not any expectation, but the most visually striking element of the film are the character and their place in the scenery. All in all, Snow White and the Huntsman is an entertaining reimagining of the grim fairy tale, if not a slightly predictable one. The film is not without its drawback, particularly in regards to pacing. Perhaps the most jarring plot point in the clumsy introduction of the dwarf, which doesn't come until well into the second act. In fact, the final cut could stand to shave off a few minutes or at least allot that time to further develop the main character. While the story only tip-tops on emotion depth, there's no denying the film's impeccable dazzle. It may not be twisted black fantasy we were hoping for, but all things considered, Sanders' Snow White is possibly the most compelling take we have seen on the story thus far, and that alone is a testament to the finished production. Snow White and the Huntsman movie box office performance. July 31 update in the United States and Canada. Despite the loss of nearly 15% of its winners, Snow White and the Huntsman was down less than 8% compared to the previous weekend, taking it $394 million at 355 locations. Overseas, the film added an estimated $2 million. In other words, if the Kristen Stewart and Rupert Sanders cheating scandal, which has been major news around the globe, in any way affected the Snow White and Huntsman box office receipt, it had a positive effect, at least in North America. For those who don't know, Rupert Sanders is married to model Liberty Ross. Kristen Stewart has reportedly been dating Robert Peterson. Now back to What Matters, directed by Sanders and starring Stewart, Chris Hemsworth, Charlize Theron, and Sam Claflin. As of Sunday, July 29, Snow White and the Huntsman has grossed an estimated $385.46 million globally, $153 globally, and $40 in US and Canada, and $232 million and $59 internationally. Will Snow White and the Huntsman reach $400 million? A couple of weeks ago, it seems possible that Snow White and the Huntsman would reach the $400 million milestone worldwide. At this stage, however, bringing a Canada release or an unexpected box office jump that no longer seems at all feasible. No, the cheating, the scandal had nothing to do with that. The Dark Knight Rises, on the other hand, is certainly a key culprit. After the 10 days, the Christopher Nolan Christian Bale Batman film has brought in an estimated $248.2 million overseas, and there's only so much money to be spent at movie theater. Snow White and the Huntsman current worldwide total is an estimated $385.4 million. Chances are the Scandals film will ends it run somewhere around $395 million. Produced by Roth Films, the company headed by Alice in Wonderland's Jew Ruth, and distributed by Universal Pictures domestically and in most internationally territories via UIP. Snow White and Huntsman reportedly cost a whopping $170 million. As a rule, through those percentages can be widely. Hollywood studios collect circa 50% of these movies' total gross at the North America box office and 40% of the overseas take. If we apply those percentages to Snow White and the Huntsman, the period fantasy adventure has earned Universal Ruth Films approximately $76.6 million in North America and $92.9 million overseas, for a grand total of $165.5 million, or about $5 million less than the film's official budget. But let's not quit nitpicky. For our purpose, Snow White and the Huntsman has finally recovered its Garanatona budgets on the worldwide box office. Now remember, Universal quite likely spent another $80 to $90 million plugging distributing their reported $170 million film. Although marketing and distribution expansion can vary widely, as a rule of thumb, the amount to about half of the film budget. Obviously, Snow White and the Huntsman will not recover that amount at the box office, but the studio will in all probability recover those expenses and more once global additionally revenue are tiled. That being the case, cheating scandal or no cheating scandal, expect Snow White and the Huntsman 2 to get made. Of course, whether or not cast and director will remain the same in that table, but then again, that was debatable long time before the news of the Kristen Stewart's Rupert Sanders affairs break out. Note: the Snow White and the Huntsman DVD comes out on September 11 in the United States. In addition to Kristen Stewart as Snow White, Charlize Theron is the Evil Queen Ravenna, Chris Hemsworth as the Huntsman, and Sam Claflin as Prince William. The Snow White and the Huntsman cast include Bob Hoskins, Ian McShane, Eddie Madsen, Ray Winstone, Vincent Regan, Noah Huntley, Nick Forrest, Rachel Sterling, and Toby Jones. In Snow White and the Huntsman, screenplay was credited to Evan Dudley, John Lee Hancock, and Hussein Amini. As of Sunday, July 15, Rupert Sanders' Snow White and the Huntsman has earned $370 million globally, $151.6 million, 40% in the United States and Canada, in addition to $218 million, 59.1% internationally. Once again, it's not bad at all of a movie some have enlisted on selling a modest or moderate box office success. Produced by Ruth Films, the company headed by Alice in Wonderland's Jew Ruth, and distributed by Universal Pictures, Snow White and the Huntsman reportedly cost a whopping $170 million. As a rule, though whose percentage can vary widely, Hollywood studios get around 50% of their movies gross at the North America box office and 40% of the overseas take. If we apply those percentages to Snow White and the Huntsman's, Rupert Sanders' period fantasy adventure has earned Universal Roth Films approximately $76 million in North America and $87.5 million overseas, for a grand total of $163.5 million, or about $6.5 million less than the film's official budget. So, will Snow White and the Huntsman end up in the black? As stated in the previous Snow White and the Huntsman, we see yes, it is definitely will box office revenue represent a relatively small percentage of a film's total income. True figures vary from film to film and from country to country, but a recent local UK study pegged them at about 25%. Even if we raise the percentage as high as 50%, that means once Wildline estimate revenues are applied, Snow White and the Huntsman should have added at least another $370 million to its total take. That would be more than enough to recover the film's marketing and distribution budget and associated external expenses and leave the producing companies quite a bit of extra change. That helps to explain why a Snow White and Huntsman sequel is reportedly in the work. Whether or not the sequel will play out remains to the scene. From the get-to-go, producer Joe Ruth said the intended Snow White and the Huntsman to be part 1 of the trilogy. But this is the stage. The part 2 content look like an idea that would be especially true if things don't have to be rushed, and there certainly will not be a sequel to Julia Roberts' Lily Collin Mirror Mirror. And here's wondering if the sequel will be known as Snow White and the Huntsman 2 in 3D, so as of the boost foreign sales of that smooth to become another costly production. Studios spends considerably less than a marketing distributing DVDs than big screen release, while television rights are a financial donana as the related costs are usually small. Also worth noting is that at least in the domestic market, the studio's cost of the gross from DVD sale is about 60%, and bear in mind that percentage of the money Universal and Ruth Film earn will be, however, rectangly shared with the talent getting a cut of the Snow White and the Huntsman gross. Rupert Sanders' Snow White and the Huntsman has earned $354 million worldwide as of 30 July 12. The film has grossed $150.6 million, 42% in North America, in addition to $204 million up to July 8 in the international box office. Not bad at all of a movie some insist on referring to a modest success. Now let's talk about the full cast and crew of the movie. The movie is directed by Rupert Sanders. Writing credit goes to Yvonne Dougherty, John Lee Hancock, Rosanne Amney, Yvonne Dougherty screen story. Cast: Kristen Stewart as Snow White, Chris Hemsworth as the Huntsman, Charlize Theron as Ravenna, Sam Claflin as William, Sam Stropniel as Finn, Ian McShane as Beth, Bob Hoskins as Muir, Ray Winstone as God, Nick Frost as Neon, Eddie Mersenne as Dior, Toby Jones as Cole, Johnny Harris as Quirt, Brian Gleason as Gus, Vincent Regan as Duke Hammond, Liberty Ross as Snow White's mother, Noah Hentley as King Magnus, Charis Obi as Mirrorman, Lily Cole as Greta, Rachel Sterling as Anna, Hattie Gatbed as Lily, Rafe Costi as young Snow White, Xavier Atkin as young William, Nancy Haley as Ravenna mother, Azzy Michael Small as young Ravenna, Elliot Rave as young Finn, Mark Winkett as Thomas, Jimmy Blackley as Ian, David Logan as Brocky, Matt Berry as Percy, Craig Hick as Black Knight Journal, Peter Fernando as Black Knight, Andrew Hawley as God on Duty, Joey Esna as Aladdin, Gerald Trotter as Duke's Commander, Tom Mullion as Soldier, Julian Seeger as Woodsman, Paul Warren as Emaciated Peasant, Ed Osman as George Dorf Double, Charlie Akin as Archer, Sam Allen Extra, Karen Anderson Murph Dwarf Double, Oliver Andrew Waller Chairbo, Lescio Ortens Palace Worker, Lee Bennett Dark Army Warrior, Jason Boostridge, Duke's Army Soldier, Neath W. Caravan Nolan, Duncan CZ Ravenna Cart, Lucy Keppel Prisoner Car, James Cook, Dark Army Soldier, James Corey, Ravenna's Personal Guard, Javane Edwards, Extra, Uncredited, Bronny Francis, Gatsby Villager, Jack Francis Ravenna Archer, Mick Freer Kelsey Village Carpenter, Nick Gavis, Finland Woman, Craig Garner, Carl Dorf Double, Dylan Goodall, Ferry, Roman Green, Village Peasant, Empty, Mark Hilder, Duke's Army Soldier, Sean Poole Hosting, Snow White Guard, Matthew Hobbs, Shadow Soldier, Kevin Hudson as Archer, Cameron Lees as the Nobleman, Martin Pollock, Ravena's Servant, David Vaughn, Shadow Soldier, Daniel Westwood, Special Action Soldier, Mitch Matham, Duke's Army Soldier, Christian Wolf Elmoy, Ravena's Archer. The film is produced by Rollier Baraco as associate producer, Gloria S. Borders as executive producer as Gloria Borders, Sarah Bradshaw as co-producer, Helen Hayden as producer, Airline Surf Unit, Sam Merson as producer, Palak Peter as executive producer, Geo Ruth as producer. Film music by James Newton Howard. Cinematography by Craig Fraser. Editing by Conrad Buff Ivy and Neil Smith. Casting by Lucy Bevan. Production design by Dominic Watkins. Art direction by Andrew Eckland Snow. Alastair Block, John Frakish, Olivier Gaudier, Stuart Rose, David Farron, supervising art director. Set decoration by Fianj McCarthy. Costume design by Colleen Artwood. Makeup department: Rose Aberry, prosthetic makeup artist; Francisco Albrico, hairdresser; Enzo Aguilera, hairstylist; Victoria Bancroft, prosthetic makeup artist; Lisa Sarnado, special makeup effect hair technician; Sam Beer, hairdresser; Farah Began, standby optician; Benjamin Brown, special makeup effect artist; Stuart Brown, prosthetic modeler; Amy Byrne, makeup artist; Sacha Carter, prosthetic production manager; Anita Casley, hair dyes; Poonam Kathrila, contact lens optician; Jolly Davies, hairdresser; Nathaniel, dental effect; Luke Fisher, prosthetic sculptor; Marcella Gonovis, hair crowd; Richard Claus, contact lens optical; Victoria Holt, prosthetic makeup artist; Colin Jackman, sculptor; Leela Kerlake, personal hair stylist; John Kavanka, prosthetic; James Cornock, melt shop supervisor; Substain Lockman as prosthetic makeup artist; Sharon Martin as makeup developer; Shane Page as makeup artist; Vina Pale as crowd; Emma Sheldrick as daily hair and makeup artist; Sophia Weston as crowd makeup artist; Jennifer Hardy as makeup artist, uncredited. Production management: Sarah Bradshaw as unit production manager, Barry Bunn as supervising unit coordinator, Simon Condridge as production supervisor, Samson Haviland as assistant unit manager, Michael J. Malone as unit production manager, Tricia Miles as post-production supervisor, Graf Skips as second unit production supervisor. Lawrence Koff as post-production supervisor, CNC saturation as post-production execution, second junior director as assistant director, Dane Channing William, second assistant director, Lucy Cover, base third assistant, Jael Dickey, third assistant director, Jane Gasson, crowd coordinator, Paul Hayes, floor assistant director, Sandrine Lucy, base third assistant director, John Murphy, second assistant director, art department, Michael Asen, greensman, Roxanne Alessandro, daughter person, Moody Andrews, assistant buyer, Martin Asprey, storyboard artist, Ravi Bansal, concept artist, Ken Burnley, HOD blister, Sarah Pick, junior greens daily, Dean Bird, scenic painter, Gabber Biro, green standby, Matty Botton, prop modeler, Samuel Bozier, plaster, Constant McFrory, storyboard artist, Joel Chang, concept artist, Lisa Chug, art assistant director, Jack Doodman, junior concept artist, Jeff Orico, storyboard artist, Claire Gasnold, Patty Cash buyer, Gavin Grant, props, Andrew Guide, scenic painter, Patrick Harrison, art department assistant, Adam Mayer, sculptor assistant, John Morrison, key greensman, Stephen Murphy, greensman, Kate Perry, hot trigger, Tom Rothwell, greensman, Fred Tager, tailor, Norman Warshi, concept artist, Amanda Ward, softboard, sound department, Roberto Thomas as Foley mixer, James Asheville as Foley mixer, Sandy Pochnon as FDR mixer, Simon Case as ADR editor, Ryan Colley as recordist, Blake Collin as Foley mixer, Paula Forsythe as sound designer, Barry Fane as ADR recordist. Snow White mother wished for a girl with skin as white as snow, lips are red as blood, hair as black as raven, and a spirit strong as a rose in winter. We are later led believed to believe that this wish she made was somehow magic, even though she cast no spell. Snow White grows up spirited, alright, though we don't exactly know how she is spirited. We are simply told she is tough as long, arduous monologue delivered by Chris Hemsworth in a spectacular new broad. Honestly, this non-Thor accent may be the only worthwhile part of the film. Her mom dies. Her dad is seduced by a new woman who he decided to marry the day after meeting her because it's a fairy tale, I guess, and we should suspend our disbelief. And she becomes queen. She is Charlize Theron, and she tells little Snow that she thinks they are bound in their heart. The teeny princess like her new step's mommy. But then stepmommy, I'm sorry, her name is Ravenna, has her first night of the wedding blessed with the king and lets him in on a little secret. In the Lost Kingdom she resided in, she got rid of the king's old wife and then stole his throne. She sucks her new king's life from him while explaining that men choose women until they are not pretty anymore, and so she will prevent that. She murders him, lets in army, and when appears to be about 40 guys with crossbows and takes over. Interesting. You might say, is this our tale commentary on how women after feel used for nothing more than their beauty and therefore case to think of it as power? Good try. But mostly, it just gives the queen a reason to be crazy. She is secretly paranoid that every handsome guy is just an evil heartbreaker and punishes everyone as a result. Then she screams at them a lot. The Duke's young son William wants to go back for Snow White during the battle, but the Duke runs with the boys while there's still time. Snow White, now Kristen Stewart, grows up locked in a high tower, the whole kingdom thinking she's dead. She prays around teeny fresh air that she makes in her cell while the clutches little stick dolls. I think the dolls are supposed to be her parents. Another awkward misstep, we are never given any indication as to what the heck Christianity is doing in a world like this. And it is flat out Christianity, not some special hybrid creature for a new world. Snow White uses Bible perfect prayer, but this is a land that clearly has magic in it. How does that go together? We are never told. The queen keeps using up young women, sucking the life out of them to stay young, but she has a magic mirror thing that came from somewhere, I'm sure, that has a figure in it that only she can see for some reason, and it tells her that now Snow White has come of age, she is prettier. But she is prettier, she can defeat the queen. But if the queen kills her and holds her heart, then she'll be immortal. Right time to kill the kid. No wonder why she kept the girl alive in the first place. We get background on Ravenna later in the film and find that her mother was a sorcerer who cast a spell on her daughter to keep her alive when their teeny village was revenged by some mean king. The spell indicates that her beauty is actual power and will keep her safe, and only Ferris blood can undo the spell. But apparently she only gets to keep her beauty power if she stays pretty by sucking life out of the people like a youth dementor. Is this magic system consoled enough for you yet? Mind you, most of this is not actually explained. You have to interpret it. It might even be something entirely different that's equally difficult to understand. The queen sends her creepy brother to fetch Snow White for raping. And just to make sure you know what kind of movie they are trying to make, her brother does indeed want to rape Snow White because Game of Thrones does it. So we should be equally gritty, but Snow White magically found a rusty nail right outside her teeny window moments before his visit. Yes, magically. A magic part showed her it was there. So he stabs him in the face and escapes. In the dark forest, her illusion, the plants make her terrified and then makes her collapse. The queen has no power there. Not. So it's time to get a guy who knows the area to take them there. Enter the huntsman. He is an alcoholic because he is a widower and definitely has something to live for. So why not go into the woods? He also happens to be only the character in the story with an explained emotional arc, even if it is the most click on that could come up with. He finds Snow, realizes something is up, turns on the queen's brother and helps her escape the forest. So the creepy forest was not really important, it just got him into the party. He also gives the princess except one piece of fighting advice, so clearly that will be important later. A moment for Kristen Stewart as Snow White. No, you know what? Let's not give her a moment because she spends the entire film caught between two fictional impressions and could have made more care about his career if the director had died injured. Knowing kitten to her ankle for the duration of her journey, knowing she also managed to have no chemistry with either love interest set up for her. How someone can act opposite Chris Hemsworth and not know how to make eyes at the guys beyond me. No matter how scruffy the makeup department made him, actually the scarf worked for him, so it's more confusing. About that other love interest, the Duke's son William finds out that Snow is alive and runs away to find her because he's never forgiven his dad for leaving her. Daddy Duke has an army that has been trying to find the queen at all these years. William joins the queen's brother in the hunt for Snow White, posing as a mercenary caught up guard because it's important somehow. The huntsman almost leaves Snow White with a community of women who scar their faces so the queen will not kill them, because he will fully of anguish and mansplain and cannot take it. But then the queen's brother attack and comes back to rescue her. They flee and get caught by dwarf. The band of 7, including the likes of Nick Frost, Ian Machine, Toby Jones, Ray, Winston, and Bob Hoskin. Hoskin is a blind dwarf who has magic touch side power, shocks, and they do absolutely nothing for this movie. It's so depressing. It will make you cry. They might as well just melt into one dwarfy character, Mega Dwarf, or better yet, we should trade them for the dwarf in the Mirror who deserved more screen time and we all unique character in their own right. The dwarf somehow know the huntsman. In fact, most people seem to know him for no reason at all. They take the two into a happy enhancement forest full of the fairies and butterflies and bunnies. Note this is not a aggression. In fact, the film is full of crazy magic visual. They are never addressed to assist the audience in understanding the world better. At one point, the queen takes a plaster bath that has no name function in the story whatsoever. But boy does it look impressive. I would praise the movie for not shying away from fairy tale magic and still fantastic environment tropes. But after trying to make the world look so gritty, I cannot tell what we are supposed to be taking seriously. So the happy forest gets even prettier and Snow White finds a white stage who bows to her and head dwarf Hoskin realizes that she is life itself and it is healing the land, which is why she will defeat the queen and hold the telegraph. Snow White is life. What does this mean? Is that what happened when queen wished for babies in the world? Was there a really important prophecy about this we are missed somehow in that 5 hours paralogue? Does that mean she is God? Since they all practice Christianity, does that mean that Ravenna literally encompasses death then and so why? This is not worth it. The queen's brother comes back to bug them. The huntsman kills him. One of the dwarfs is killed and William joins the merry band. William and Snow talks on their own and flirt and Snow kisses him. He hands her an apple. He used to tease her about apples when they were kids. She takes and bites and it's poison. And William is actually asleep as they kept with the boys. This was the queen. Which means that the only romantic scene in the film thus far actually takes place between two women. Which would be interesting if that movie was international, but it clearly wasn't. The huntsman and William disper the queen before she can get Snow's heart and she turns into a son of ravens. Get it, Ravenna, never mind. William kisses Snow White's lifeless body and they take her back to the Duke's fortress. She lies there in a white dress and the huntsman gets stung and talks about how she reminds him of his dead wife who made him a better person and he is so sorry he failed them both. We never find out exactly how he failed his wife, but he does kiss Snow White and he cries and she cries and he leaves the room and she's alive, obviously, because of the whole crying thing. I get it. They thought they were cleverly observing the story expectation. True love's kiss was a drunken comer with the heart of gold, not a prince, but we have been given no romance to latch onto. They have spoken about 10 sentences to each other total, most of them involvement running and hiding. I found myself distractedly reaching for some emotional impact by staring as hard as I can get into Chris Hemsworth's sorrowful blue eyes, but it's just not happening. Snow White does know how to defeat the queen, now somehow being mostly dead all day. I think what we actually mean was that she magically saw that she was only one who could kill the king, but she doesn't say that. She goes out to talk to the Duke's men and galvanize them into a fight. The people subdue their shock at her destruction and are treated to monologue that was clearly meant to go down in history books as the one time we allocated a woman to give the Eve of War speech. We are supposed to be thinking Aragon, maybe before the final battle in the Return of the King, but it doesn't come off very well when the gets of the whole thing in. iron can melt, but iron will ride inside itself, but iron can fork salt too. So we will fork iron salt, and I am here to be your salt. And who will ride with me? The speech is literally that incoherent. I cannot believe those were made it into a final draft for anything. So the army gets together and they go to fight the queen's forces. Now about 40 guys on 60 guys. And Snow makes it to the queen and decided it's really smart to throw her shield on the ground before facing her. And they fight. The queen rakes, and then Snow White uses that special one move the huntsman taught her at the beginning of the film to knife the queen in the chest, and we're all good. Then Snow White gets coordinated and looks out over the throne room to her all friends. And the huntsman enters at the back, eventually looking much cleaner, and that's the end. Nope, that's all for. I guess they felt that Snow White proved that she had all the spirit and could definitely lead an army to war. At least that's what everyone in the film kept saying, even though she spent most of it scared silence and letting handsome man help her across brooks. Shame on the producer of Alice in Wonderland 2010 of thinking that what was kind of follow-up. Regardless of how you feel about Preston's take on Carol, there can be no doubt that Alice stepped into the armor with purpose and actually had a character to speak of. Snow White and the Huntsman is disrupting at so many levels. The worst on being how hard certain actors are trying to make it work. Hemsworth, Theron, Hoskins, I am mainly looking at you. Sure, the movie would have benefited from some humor, maybe a little less frantic trekking through the mountains and a whole lot less CGI badger. But what is needed more than anything was the most basic world building and a marginally clever part that would not make the original Disney cartoon look genius by comparison. These things should not be so difficult. I find myself in position of having to give Mirror Mirror more credit than I did before. At least it was entertaining. That was truly not. It looks like we will be waiting at least another decade before a screen treatment of Snow White attempts to owe us again. 2012, you have just let us down. Some thoughts on Snow White and the Huntsman. The days between Christmas and New Year are traditionally the time when the TV station troll out the Hollywood blockbuster or Venable blockbusters from 2 or 3 years ago in what they term German free TV premiere. It's also time to catch up on these movies which looked kind of interesting at the time, but not interesting enough to see them at the theater or get them on DVD. And so it was that I chanced to watch Snow White and the Huntsman from 2012 tonight. Starring Kristen Stewart as Snow White, Chris Hemsworth as the Huntsman, and Charlize Theron as the Evil Queen in a very loose adaptation of the fairy tale. Now I have expressed my issue with the current Vigo of a taped adaptation of the classic fairy tales before, namely that some of these adaptations feels like clueless cultural appropriation, and that I resent the fact that these adaptations, whether good or bad, often tend to displace the original tale in the minds of many. Never mind the idea like I am going to write a feminist fairy tale retelling, or I am going to retell a fairy tale from the antagonist's point of view. Often we are not as original as their author believe. So we're on the fairy tale wrestling scale from Once Upon a Time and Hansel and Gretel, witch hunters, I absolutely horrible to 3 Harzan from Cinderella, and the fairy tale bride. Quite wonderful does Snow White and Huntsman fall. Squarely in the middle, it turns out it's certainly not a revelatory retelling but a perfectly adequate and entertaining one. In short, good viewing for a holiday night. Snow White and the Huntsman uses the fairy tale only as a very basic frame for its plot, while the rest of the story borrows of a dozen different sources. The speaking witches and Little Scene and Dwarf songs are clearly influenced by Peter Jackson's adaptation of The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, while the gloomy colors palette is pretty much the look of gritty historical drama and the grim end of fantasy these days. The Evil Queen's tactic to suss the life force out of young women to retain her youth and beauty is clearly influenced by the legend surrounding the modernist Hungarian countess Elizabeth Bathory. While the instant vibe of the Evil Queen's relationship with her creepy brother are straight from Game of Thrones, Snow White's childhood love William takes up archery and guerrilla tactics borrows from a dozen Robin Hood movies. Snow White horse getting stuck in the quicksand during her escape from the castle was taken from Wolfgang Petersen's 1984 adaptation of Michael Ade The Never-Ending Story, where the very some fate blows as to horse. Expect the Snow White and the Huntsman glosses over the horse fate, versus the never-ending story makes it all the tears in worth. The dark wood into which Snow White escapes and the frightening vision it brings the reminiscence of Snow White's scary flight through the forest in the 1938 Disney adaptation of the fairy tale of the Dark Side Tree in the debauched scene of the Empire Strike Back of the Swamp of Sadness from the Never-Ending Story and of the Darkwood from Seaman R. Green's Blue Moon Rising. Talking of which, the Evil Queen or her taste for speaky crowns is slightly reminiscent of the villainous Empress Lionsgate in Green's Death Talker series. So in short, the film is a hogwash of fancy ideas we have seen before. It still works well enough and there are some moments and scenes that are reasonably original, such as the village of the scared women who deliberately scare themselves and their young daughters so the Evil Queen will not suck their beauty life force out. Indeed, I would have loved to see more of the village of the scared women and also more of the dwarf and the valley of the fairy fog. Indeed, considering the Snow White and the Huntsman was a perfectly entertaining film. I was surprised by the amount of negative reviews on IMDb and elsewhere. Upon closer examination, it seems that the dislike of the movie was mostly due to the fact that a whole lot of people simply cannot stand Kristen Stewart. Now I have never gotten the Kristen Stewart hate, but then I have never gotten the hate of the Annie Hathaway or Keanu Reeves either, and that actor I dislike are usually not widely hated. In Kristen Stewart's case, I suspect that much of the vitriol against her is actually displaced Twilight hate, especially since it was so very fashionable to hate Twilight for a while, combined with a good dose of slut-shaming following Mrs. Stewart's affair with Rupert Sanders, director of Snow White and the Huntsman, and her subsequent breakup with Robert Pattinson. Oddly enough, absolutely no one seems to blame Rupert Sanders for the affair, even though Sanders is almost 20 years Kristen Stewart senior and was a married father of two at the time. Nonetheless, the Kristen Stewart hater may be onto something because the character of the Snow White is the weak link in Snow White and the Huntsman, so I'm not sure if that's really Kristen Stewart's fault or the script. Now it's a feature of fairy tales that their characters are not very well rounded or developed. Perhaps this is also why fairy tales adaptations are so popular these days, because the characters are largely empty vessels waiting to be filled. In the version of the Snow White recorded by the Brothers Grimm, no character has any sort of personality beyond good and evil. The dwarf didn't become individual character and with individual personality until the 1938 Walt Disney adaptation, on which most subsequent versions, including Snow White and the Huntsman, still draw. Now, Snow White and the Huntsman does actually quite well with the characterizations of the Evil Queen by giving her a motivation beyond, well, she is evil and terribly vain. Because in the movie Ravenna, yes, the Evil Queen gets a name as well, only becomes the monster she is response to a world where her beauty is the only thing that interesting man about her and allows her to wield power. One could almost consider that a feminist categories of the beauty myth, except that I don't think the movie is in the self-aware. The Huntsman, a character who only appears very briefly in most versions of the fairy tale and is sometimes disbanded when all together, is not just prompted to co-hero in the movie. He also gained the most characterization and is turned into a grief and PTSD-stricken widower who slowly regains his ability to care about life. It's not the worst most original characterization, but it works, and Chris Hemsworth actually does quite well when what the script gives him. Consequently, it's quite interesting that knowledge about PTSD is so obvious is our world today, and it's pretty much a prosecute for fictional heroes these days. See the 2012 John Carter movie, in which John Carter is troubled, PTSD-stricken widower and Civil War Peterson who needs to learn to believe and love again. A characterization which is quite far from Edgar Rice Burroughs' original version of the character, and even the mighty Avenger has now become the PTSD super team. And it now is interesting that Chris Hemsworth as Thor is the only Avenger to escape the Marvel PTSD epidemic unscathed, only to promise catch it Snow White and the Huntsman. I found the sheer amount of fictional heroes with PTSD quite fascinating, especially since the knowledge that war and other traumatic experiences are. Well, traumatic is not exactly new, but while military service is the most recent word of note as long as being a prosecute for fictional heroes, particularly in the US. It is the only in the past 10 years or so that those heroes have been fully portrayed as traumatic by their experience. There is also a marked difference between the traumatic Vietnam veteran of 90s 80s pop culture who was not necessarily a villain but always a loose cannon, and the modern PTSD hero who managed to find a way to live with the PTSD and still remain or become a hero. But while Snow White and the Huntsman portrays the Evil Queen as a woman driven, made by the beauty myth, and the Huntsman as a PTSD stricken warrior who's lost his will to the live. The central character is Snow White herself remained rather bland, or she has her fancy moments when she stabs the Evil Queen's scary brother with a nail and later leads her army into battle clad in reasonable armor. But unlike with the Evil Queen or the Huntsman, we never really get a sense of who Snow White is. All we know is that she is brave and good and noble and poor and the embodiment of life, and mightily pissed off at the Evil Queen. Unlike what many believe, Kristen Stewart is not a bad actress, and in fact she makes a very good Snow White physically. However, the script doesn't give her much to work with, so her Snow White remains rather bland. Another problem is that the last triangle the film tried to set up between Snow White, her childhood love William, and the Huntsman falls flat, because here simply is no chemistry between Kristen Stewart and her co-star Chris Hemsworth and Sam Colofan. Now, Kristen Stewart clearly had chemistry with Robert Pattinson and Taylor Lautner and the Twilight film, and Chris Hemsworth clearly had chemistry with Natalie Portman and Kat Dennings in the Thor movies. But here, Kristen Stewart has more chemistry with the dwarf who dies than with Chris Hemsworth, and indeed I never got the impression that Snow White was even remotely attracted to the Huntsman at all, which takes some doing because half of the heterosexual humans worldwide are currently attached to Chris Hemsworth. And Chris Hemsworth does his best to show that his character is infatuated with Snow White. He has more chemistry with pretty much even secondary and tertiary cast member in the Avenger of Thor that he has with Kristen Stewart. We were rooting of the Huntsman to end up the Snow White, beside he has only who kissed her back to life. But that was because Chris Hemsworth actually gave the impression to care for Snow White. And indeed, the movie leaves the love triangle unresolved, properly hoping for a sequel which so far has not materialized. As the film ends with Snow White sitting on her throne, looking down benignly at both William and the Huntsman, who are both clearly frustrated with her, and choosing neither. In that, the ending is quite reminiscent of the final scene of the Star Wars, where Princess Leia hands out medal to Luke Skywalker and Han Solo, who are both pretty much failing over each other to attract her attention. But while the Star Wars ending pretty much cracker with the sexual tension, Snow White and the Huntsman does none of that. Instead, the scene implies that Snow White chooses the throne and the kingdom and decided against both William and the Huntsman. It's the equivalent Star Wars ending the Princess Leia declaring herself married to the rebellion. So while Snow White and the Huntsman provided perfectly adequate entertainment, the movie could have been so much better if it had given it protagonist Snow White a bit more consideration beyond she is a good person. Finally, if you have only one character of color in the whole movie and there is a zero reason for everybody to be white, since this is not in fact the real magic age in Europe. While coincidentally we are 100% white either, it is too much to ask not to make him a villain, or better yet, have ever than more character of colors. The film Snow White and the Huntsman is about a wicked Queen Ravenna who kills the king and takes over his kingdom. At the time she decided to spare the life of her stepdaughter Snow White. Years later, Ravenna's magic mirror tells her that Snow White is about to become the fairest of the kingdom. What happened in Snow White and the Huntsman? Afraid that she might lose her power, Ravenna decided to kill Snow White. However, the princess managed to escape from the castle and runs into the dark forest. Ravenna summons the Huntsman to capture Snow White. In exchange, she promises to revive his dead wife. The Huntsman eventually finds Snow White but has a change of heart and decides to help her. He teaches the princess some self-defense technique and how to survive in the forest. Over time, they become friends. While escaping from Ravenna, Snow White and the Huntsman meet a group of dwarfs who were initially trying to rob them. Their leader believes that Snow White is the only one who can save their kingdom from Ravenna. Therefore, they decided to help her. Meanwhile, an old childhood friend of Snow White, William, infiltrates the queen's army. Together, they all head toward a sanctuary where a white deer places Snow White as the true heir of the kingdom. However, Ravenna soldiers appear out of nowhere and abuse them. A violent fight ensues, fatally injure one of the dwarfs. William reveals himself to Snow White. While taking to William, Snow White eats a poisonous apple. It turns out that the person in front of her is actually Ravenna. Shortly after, Snow White falls into a deep coma. Everyone is devastated by the tragic news. The Huntsman bids Snow White farewell and kisses her, breaking the spell. Snow White wakes up and gathers an army to fight Ravenna. The ending of Snow White and the Huntsman shows Snow White and her soldiers storming inside the castle. The princess confronts Ravenna and they have a fierce duel. Snow White stabs Ravenna in the heart, and while dying, the wicked queen reveals her true self. The Snow White steps up as the new queen. In the beginning of the film, the miller warns Ravenna that there will be someone more beautiful than her in the near future. However, the mysterious entity also tells the wicked queen that her rival is also her salvation. There are many ways to interrupt the mirror's word. First, Snow White will dethrone Ravenna once she becomes the fairest of the kingdom. Second, if Ravenna kills Snow White, she will be able to absorb her all beauty and youth, making her even more powerful and immortal. Third, Snow White's purity is the only weapon against Ravenna's dark magic. Having said that, Snow White is Ravenna's most powerful enemy, but also her only way to redemption. Had Ravenna shown any remorse of her actions, Snow White would probably forgive her and show her the right path. Only someone more beautiful than Ravenna can kill her, and that person happens to be Snow White. The wicked queen is vulnerable to that one who possesses the fairest blood. Having said that, when Snow White stabbed Ravenna, she had no other option but to die like any other mortal. Why does the Huntsman kiss wake Snow White? It seemed that the Huntsman had a deeper connection with Snow White than William did, which would justify why his kiss woke the princess up and not William's. Throughout the film, it was the Huntsman who taught Snow White how to protect herself and survive. The man even helped the princess find her destiny. Needless to say, the Huntsman has a lot of love, respect, and loyalty for Snow White. In addition, she gave him a reason to live, something he has not felt in a long time since his beloved wife passed away. William, on the other hand, also deeply cares about Snow White. However, unlike the Huntsman, he loves the idea of her. In William's head, Snow White is still the little girl he met during childhood, but in reality she has become so much more than that image. That's why his kiss was not enough to wake the princess up. Snow White and the Huntsman discussion. The film Snow White and the Huntsman is a fancy film mainly made for entertainment, but it does dabble upon a couple of themes. The story explores certain ideas such as beauty, power, and games. In Snow White and the Huntsman, there is a clear connection between beauty and power. The wicked Ravenna queen is obsessed with being the fairest of them all. With her beauty and ability to preserve her youth, she manipulated people and destroyed many other kingdoms. Ravenna embodies the strict beauty standard that many societies try to enforce on their women. Ironically, the wicked queen beauty is also her biggest cause. Ravenna is hostile to the idea that beauty is the most important quality for women. Another theme that is ultimately connection with the beauty is agaze. Ravenna is not only obsessed with being with the most beautiful, but she also converts youth. So the film sort of conveys the message that women lose their power when they grow older. It shows the negative effect to ageism on women who are often judged by their appearances and expected to stay young and attractive. In my opinion, Snow White and the Huntsman is a film that puts a nice twist on the classic fairy tale. It was nice to see the female lead evolve from a scared little girl to a strong and brave young woman. In this version, Snow White is not a passive princess waiting for her prince to save her. She takes matter into her own hands and leads an army to regain the throne that was rightfully hers. You know what is also interesting? For one, there is no romance between the female lead and the male lead, and I believe it was an incredibly smart decision not to make the huntsman a cheesy romantic interest, but rather an ally and a friend. This relationship dynamic makes the story more wholesome and empowering for Snow White. Overall, Snow White and the Huntsman is a very entertaining watch with beautiful visuals. Although Kristen Stewart plays the main character in terms of performance, Charlize Theron completely steals the show. The actress delivers a powerful performance as the wicked Queen Ravenna. Thor star Chris Hemsworth recently recalled being punched by Kristen Stewart while filming a scene on Snow White and the Huntsman. Hemsworth starred as Eric the Huntsman in the 2012 epic retelling of the German fairy tale Snow White. The film reimagined the classic story as gritty legend featuring grand battle, striking visual effect and a variety of magical creatures. Hemsworth is joined by Kristen Stewart as Snow White, Charlize Theron as the Evil Queen Ravenna, and Bob Hoskins as Muir. The magical blind elder dwarf Hoskins' role in the film was his last before passing away in 2014. After Snow White decaps into the dark forest to escape Ravenna's wrath, the Evil Queen hires Eric to track down the princess and capture her. After successfully finding Snow White in the enchanted woods, Eric has a charge of heart and defends her from Ravenna's brother Finn. During an attempt to subdue the fearful Snow White, Stewart punches Hemsworth in the face. The hit was supposed to be a stage punch, but Stewart made very real contact with Hemsworth. While speaking with GQ, Hemsworth recalled the time he has punched by Stewart while making a film Dark Forest scene on Snow White and the Huntsman. When asked whether Hemsworth has forgiven Stewart about the punch, the actor laughed and explained that he actually wished she did not stop the lake to apologize to him. The Hemsworth says, "Oh yeah, I was more upset that she didn't continue on thought the take. She kind of hit me the immediately went, oh my god, I'm so sorry, I was like that would have been the perfect, more truthful take me had. I think she was more upset than I was." Hemsworth appears to have taken the accident hit part literally and figuratively on the chin and brushed it off. Not only any grades against his co-star, the actor appears to be cherished the moment from the film as he was grateful to work with Stewart. Even during a physically challenging moment such as that, Hemsworth also impressed the realism of the scene, hopefully using it to create a more accurate performance. Accidents are frequent on movie sets, especially during fight scenes. Many movies have been included the takes in which huntsmen and actors are injured in the final cut of the film. Tom Cruise famously broke his ankle during a building to building jump in Mission Impossible Fallout, which is evident in the theatrical release. Michael B. Jordan also took a powerful hit during a boxing scene on the set of the Rocky sequel Creed, where she was knocked out, which was also seen in the final cut. Although Hemsworth took a very real blow during Snow White and the Huntsman, he appears to still be on a good terms with Stewart, acknowledging that danger can be part of the job.